All right. Hello, listeners. We are back with the Scythe Strategy Podcast. Today we've got a special guest, True Bro Yeti, and he's joining us for the first time. And we also have Cole, Bulldog Coma, our normal co host. So we're excited to jump into our topic today. We're going to be discussing the difference between 1v1 strategy and how to approach it versus a multiplayer strategy when you're playing competitive Scythe. And we're really excited to have Yeti here today. And his recent results were very impressive after just picking up the game. And he made it to the finals of the Auto Bidder tournament with and tied for second place with Nevik, only losing to Joy Division in that. So I'm like, how is that possible? How do you just come out of nowhere and advance that quickly? So
Crazy.
he definitely has some insights into the multiplayer strategy, which I definitely struggle with. And I think Cole maybe has a better handle on it, but he's kind of got a pretty good handle on both 1v1 and multiplayer. I'm good at 1v1 and struggling with multiplayer, and Yeti is advancing in multiplayer quickly, but very sorry is advancing in 1v1 quickly, but is very talented at multiplayer just right off the bat. So uh, happy to hear the insights and the perspective of these two talented players. So let's jump into it.
Yeah. So, what do you guys think? What do you guys think is more interesting from a gameplay perspective and from a strategizing perspective? 1v1 or multiplayer? Let's start there.
Mm.
That's a great question.
I think they're both really interesting. I think they, I think there's more of like a, almost not quite politics part of the multiplayer part, but like you have multiple players. It's kind of like the difference in like the old RTS games between like 1v1 versus like free for all 4 player. Like it's gonna be different. Like you can't just come out and start smashing everybody in 1v1v1v1. Um, it kind of benefits you to pit your opponents against each other and have them be the ones to police each other and weaken each other, and then you can kind of come in and sweep, and, strike at specific points. But 1v1 really tests, um, your ability to be aggressive. I feel like, and then also your ability to uh, defend against that if necessary. Like knowing that matchup specifically. So one thing I think that I mess up in for 1v1s is like the combats, like overthrowing and combats, because I think time and time again I'll get into a position where I feel like it's a must win, and I throw a ton of power in combat cards, and then I win that, and then I just slowly get ground out for the rest of the game because I don't have enough. Whereas in 3 or 4 player, that might not happen because if one player is trying to grind me out, that gives the other player the advantage. So you're not really incentivized to just go after one person.
Yeah, that's a good there's some good points there. What I was thinking, so your question, Cole, was which one do we think is more interesting strategically?
Hmm.
Okay. They're almost a little bit of a different game. They both have like strategic angles
So,
that are pretty interesting. I like 1v1 because here are the reasons that I'm so adamant about 1v1, and I think some of it comes from a strategy and some of it comes from an improvement perspective, but this has been my take from the beginning, which is punishing mistakes is an interesting piece of the playstyle and strategy for me. And in 3 player or multiplayer, like in 1v1, any mistake will be exposed, so you'll learn much more quickly the fundamentals of the game. And you can stand up against tougher opponents in terms of those fundamentals that you developed more quickly. The other piece that I really like is there's no one to blame but yourself uh, if you lose the game. And then the other piece is on advancement. So training in terms of like reps you can get in for 1v1 games. You can finish a game in like 40 minutes max in a 1v1, and then just play over and over again and reflect and improve. With 3 player, it's actually gotten down for the better players to like 15 per player time limit, so it's not that much worse. But I like to be able to just with not needing as much to play and get a lot of reps in and get a lot of learnings in really fast with less time. So time to improve and training, it's more efficient.
Yeah, I would say I definitely agree with that in a way. I like Yeti's point about politics being something in a multiplayer game, almost like you need to manage not only your own expectations, but the expectations of everybody else, and find a way to fit yourself into a strategy where you know you're going to force other people to do things to each other at the same time. Because in a Scythe game, if you don't make that happen, it's very easy for someone to just king make and end the game in a non-interesting way. Um, but that's also the same reason why I kind of think 1v1 is a little bit more strategically interesting, is because you don't have the possibility of that. Like Josh, you said, it is your own game that you're playing, and if you lose, of course, it's your own fault.
Yep. I do think that as I've been learning three player with good players towards the end of the game, the dynamic gets really interesting towards the end of
Hmm.
the game, and I think that that has a lot of strategic depth, and there can be really creative ways to set up situations where you're at the advantage, but it's much more intricate and hard for me to keep up with some of the good like towards the end game in a good three-player game and understand all the like the angles and possibilities and not accidentally give an edge to one of the other players. So I think fundamental wise one player, but then in terms of the strategic diplomacy and the strategic intricacies, the towards the end game of a three player is there's so much depth and it's actually difficult to navigate and takes quite a bit of practice. So I
Mm.
am very much a fan of that, but I need more exposure to it. Yeti understands that much better than I do.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of my thoughts on 3 to 4 player, I guess we need to set this from the get go. A lot of it applies to tournament bid play. So, if you're just playing random ranked 3 to 4 player, you can get into really uneven and unbalanced matchups. You can match against, there can be really wide skill disparity. So it can become a lot more chaotic. So a lot of what I've kind of thought about ahead of time of this podcast applies to specifically when you have the bid. So even if you have a really weak matchup, um, then you have that point advantage where you can try to stall with it. Oh, looks like we lost Cole.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, we can keep going there. So, yeah, that's a good, I guess, what is that? A good qualifier for what we're going to be discussing in terms of the three player. And I would say, yeah, with one player, I'm just talking like 1v1 ranked or
Yeah,
1v1 league, which league it controls it to be more equal. But I'd say mine
yeah,
applies more generally. So that's good to qualify for the multiplayer piece. I would be interested, Yeti, could you talk about some of the dynamics and the complexities that happen, sort of maybe the most common ones to start with at the towards the end of a three player competitive match.
yeah, for sure. So my thoughts might be a little bit scattered. So I just kind of wrote down some things. Um, and some of this applies to 1v1 and some of it applies to 3 player. I think one of the things is you do want to have agency in the game, which is why so many people dislike the IFA factions, Albion and Tagawa, because you don't have the speed mech. So there was a lot of games in the tournament where I kind of maneuvered my what's it called? Um, my draft to where I would, if it was me and another player who I knew was really, really strong, then I tried to maneuver it to where they would be on a weaker faction. And when I would have more agency. So then I could try to, um, exploit that fact basically. So you want to
Oh,
have agency and try to find ways to have agency in the game. So you can't just sit back and be totally passive. And I say that as somebody who likes to play greedy, where I sort of sit back and do my own thing and kind of encourage other people to attack each other by being a hard target, or just kind of delaying um, me kind of putting myself out there. But it also depends on the factions too. So one of the first things I'll talk about with 3 player is you kind of need to figure out who's the beatdown. That's kind of a concept from Magic the Gathering. Is
huh.
if you have a control deck and a rush deck, then the rush deck, the pressure is on the rush deck to beat the other player down, because if you go to the late game, then the control deck is going to come out on top. So, um, one example is like if it's Polania, a lot of times they're going to be the beatdown. They can control other players. They can harass people. Sometimes without even an attack. Like if you're playing against Rustviet and you move the mech over to the lake near Rustviet's base, that can put pressure on Rustviet where they feel like they need to respond. Maybe they'll delay their actions, um, or risk having their resources taken or giving up a free combat and being set back. Versus something like Crimea can be the beatdown in some cases, but a lot of times they're not. They're going to be a little bit slower getting out of the base, and then they're going to get to the center of the board, and from there control the game. And you can see the same from Rustviet as well. To a certain degree, you can see it from Albion and Tagawa. Like if they, especially again with the bids, if they're a bit weaker and they have a higher bid, and they're able to, like if Albion's able to control space and hold that space and maybe get to high popularity as well, then they could be the not really the control, but you know what I'm saying. Like they wouldn't be the beatdown in that case. But I feel like
they set the bar for the score stall that people would need to reach to even try to end, basically.
Yeah, and that's where agency comes in, because a faction like Albion or Tagawa is not really going to be able to be the beatdown. Like not really. They could in some of the 1v1 matchups. One matchup we were talking about was Tagawa Industrial versus Crimea Agricultural, where Tagawa can kind of, rush in and try to take that mountain encounter against Crimea. But if you do that in a 3 or 4 player game, then all you've kind of done is ruin your game, ruin Crimea's game, and then, the 3rd or the 4th player is going to use that to their advantage.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Cool.
So, Cole, we were discussing some of the 3-player or like multiplayer kind of strategic intricacies and kind of common patterns, and Yeti was just getting into that, because I'd also love to hear about, and from you as well, Cole, like the end game type situations that sort of happen in dynamics and how to navigate those as well. But so Yeti had talked about you have to determine in multiplayer which factions, like the policing faction or the beatdown faction. So like a lot of times it's Polania. And then like in 1v1, he gave the example of Tagawa Industrial versus Crimea Agricultural. It can really bully Crimea Agricultural early, but if it was a 3-player match, then the 3rd player that's just alone would benefit from Tagawa Industrial bullying and making sacrifices in their development to bully. You can bully a lot harder in 1v1 basically, because there's not another faction sitting back and having the most efficient, greedy start with no punishments. Then they're just way ahead of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Man.
Yeah. So let's see. Do you want to talk about? Do you guys want to talk about some more 3-player strategic elements?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just expanding on what you said, I remember a game like I had with Nevik where I was Nord Inno and he was Tagawa, and then someone else was like Sax NG, and I was like, great, well, I'm just going to go in and bully Tagawa. I'm just going to destroy their game right away, and it's going to be awesome. And, I'm going to win because of this. And I came in last place, even though I basically ruined Nevik's whole game. And he was like, congratulations, you got 3rd solely by bullying me in the beginning when you had the whole game in the palm of your hand. And at that moment, I was like, I need to rethink 3-player completely, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So what would be sort of the correct way to play that, Yeti?
So do you remember which mat you were on Nordic? Like, was it industrial, innovative? Somebody can get to the fact. Innovative? Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nordic innovative?
So
I was Nord Inno, and I still ended up losing to Nevik's Tagawa after bullying him the whole game.
Yeah, so that's a faster than, maybe not faster than Sax NG, I can't remember. But anyway, you have
really
okay,
fast.
cool. Yeah, so you have agency. I would say you want to find a way to cripple your opponent or set them back without spending as much resources, or like even like Tagawa, for instance, like the classic way to set them back is just to block them. So you're not committing to attacks, you're not tanking traps. You're just sitting in their way, and then they have to make a choice. Do I ram through that? And especially if you're Nordic, you can just take that, jump to a lake, and then maybe hit them again after that if they overspend in the combat.
Yeah.
And finding a way to harass Saxony as well. So that could be one way to go about it, is kind of harass them both a little bit. Just stick yourself in the way of each of them, because Saxony also wants to get to the factory through the mountain to the right of the factory. So just sitting a mech on there will set them back a couple turns for actually getting to the factory, and then kind of moving out from there.
Ooh, so there's two key territories in that matchup versus Toga and Sax, basically, where it's like there's that mountain tile adjacent to the factory for Saxony, and then there's that village tunnel for Tagawa, and those are the two strategic tiles to come to control at certain times in the game, basically, and that would give you probably even enough of an edge to have that plus your agency and mobility and speed. You'll probably find angles later on. Basically, you don't need to do much more than that. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, that is what I'm thinking. Something else that I thought of just is, so there's kind of like an intersect. This isn't how I thought about it generally, but it just kind of came to me right now. Like there's kind of an intersect square for both Saxony and Tagawa on that village tunnel. So if you set yourself on the village tunnel and then Tagawa or Saxony hit you there, and you just kind of, you throw low, you don't expend a lot of resources, and you jump to a lake. Well, then after that, the other opponent, you can kind of set them against each other. That whoever is going next, they can then hit that person on the tunnel. I was thinking that actually happened in one of my tournament games where I was Polania, I was against Albion and Tagawa, and so I kind of came in and messed them up a little bit in the very beginning. I think I was Polania Mechanical, so I was definitely the beatdown in this case because it was Tagawa Patriotic, Albion Industrial. So I came in, harassed them a little bit, and I sat on Albion's mountain tunnel, and because I was afraid of also Albion just rushing to the factory in some cases.
Yeah.
But so Tagawa actually came, hit me on Albion's mountain tunnel, and then put a trap there, which is, it's great. It hit me out of the way, but it also really restricted Albion from that point because, then they're kind of at odds with each other. So Tagawa's there on Albion's mountain tunnel, and then I can kind of go and do other stuff. Maybe I go and harass Tagawa on the other side of the board. But it's kind of finding ways to pit your two opponents against each other like that, I think.
I would have never thought about that. It's very interesting.
I wouldn't have either. Yep.
Yeah, like when we talked about an example earlier in 3-player where I played with like Joy and Nevik, and Joy will control the factory, and then I think what he's doing is he'll wait till like right the moment when one player can beat him on the factory, like they just got strong enough through a bolster, let's just say, to win the fight to take the factory from him. Whereas where like say Nevik and I are both in position to take it from our respective angles. And he'll wait till right then and then just move off the factory and concede it to the player that just got strong enough. But he'll do it in a way where it's like Nevik goes right before me and we both have our moves up, and he'll leave right before Nevik's turn, and then Nevik takes it, and then I don't get the factory, and then he gets to avoid spending any combat resources having to fight Nevik, who is stronger than him, and then I just get blocked out. So basically, like, he'll go take an encounter, move his mechs into the water, whatever, and Nevik will take it. So I think that's a good example of the concept of like spending as little as possible, but finding creative ways to. Again, it also pits Nevik and I against each other too, and he gets to avoid any conflict without giving away a combat star. So like when you slide off the factory, you do it at a really intelligent timing, and that's that concept of finding creative ways where you exert as few resources as possible, but you're messing up and or pitting against each other your two opponents.
Yeah, and whenever you pit two opponents against each other, you are setting yourself up to do anything in the background that you need to take care of any BRAs, to spread, to get rich, complete your objectives, whatever. Like it's not only like making them do something that you want, but it's allowing you the time and the space to complete whatever objectives you need, and essentially dive in later if you want, right? And anytime somebody weakens someone else, then you can have a 3-star turn, a 4-star turn easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I would say another thing that so what I struggle with in the three-player tournaments is like playing selfishly. Basically, I'll play like a mid game. I'll be stuck in the mid game policing two people in two single 1v1s kind of all game while they're playing their own selfish game, and then I'll end up losing. So like that's a play style shift I really need to make because I'm playing it like 1v1. So like you have to play selfishly, and that gives you a big opening to play selfishly, like you talked about, Cole. Um, yeah, let me. So, in terms of another three-player dynamic, one thing that Nevik told me about is like sometimes you have to move to like a tunnel to shield the weaker player from the player with agency to
Mm.
stall the game out. So that's one of the
That's pretty
dynamics which
smart.
I've never done, but I'm like, wow, I would have never thought about that. Because yeah, the weaker player will just get run over by the player with agency, and then they spread at the same time and do a point swing and can end, let's say. So are there other ones like that, Yeti or Cole, that you guys know about for three player in kind of
So
that
that's like a
category?
late game.
Huh?
That's in the late game, right? When people are preparing to push and end. So
I
it's like
think
people are
so. Yeah, I think
okay.
so.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, I mean, one thing in general, because we've already talked about important squares, it's kind of in the mid game and in the late game. So you need to know the Riverwalk angles. So, for instance, like if you're Crimea, or let's say you're Polania and one of your opponents is Crimea, then you have to be really careful about if Crimea has a mech on the farm tunnel, because then with the factory move, they can reach your base through your farm. Things like that, where all of a sudden, somebody can attack you from an angle that you weren't expecting, or like Rusviet is pretty classic about being able to move through the villages and the farms.
Mm.
If there's a Crimea in the game and they have Wayfair, can they, even if you're hiding out on somebody else's base, like let's say Nordic space, are they going to be able to hit you with a factory card move through there? I think
So basically
that's something
spacing.
to think about as well. Yeah, I think
Spacing
spacing.
from Riverwalk is like really important to stay on top of. And
Yeah.
Wayfair. Riverwalk and Wayfair. Okay, with factory card combos. Gotcha. Okay, or you even talked about township jumping with like the triple move or double move from Rustviet. So there's a lot of tricky, kind of more advanced. There's, I mean, the township one's the hardest one to do, but that's the most insidious probably. So okay, so that's another one. Do you have any others? I'm not sure how many exist, so that's a good piece. Cole, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean Polania, the same thing with the lakes, of course. I think that's a pretty obvious one. Is like I don't know. I think you need to know at the end game, like when the end game is coming and plan accordingly. I think in 3-player games, it's a lot easier for people to get multi-star turns that you don't see because there's a lot more dynamics you have to keep hold of. Because like I think we all played a game right where I had 2 stars and went to 6 like the next turn or something like that. You guys didn't see it coming
Oh
because you get
yeah.
too focused. Yeah,
Because
that's
all eyes were on me, and then it's just like boom, he just got 4 stars.
Yeah.
exactly. That's the thing. All
That was
eyes are out usually on
beautiful.
someone who's the police or the aggressor or something like this.
I
It's
was the
like,
beatdown, yeah, and so I was
yeah,
policing both of you, and then just boom. That was gorgeous actually, Cole. Because like the two places
That
you
was a
hit
great
us
game.
had one mech, and it was they were both on oil. And you had the 3 oil objectives. So like you only had those limited movements and you used them each like perfectly for that objective 4-star turn. I forgot about that,
right.
man.
It was a little bit. It was a little bit of luck for sure. But it's like this is the kind of shit you need to watch out for in 3-player, right? It's like there are so many more opportunities when you have lots of single mechs scattered around the board, right? You have lots of workers. You have many things that people can kind of take advantage of. So it's like really when you say you're planning for the end game, you kind of have to start planning for the end game on like turn 10 or 11, depending on which factions you're playing, and say, like, know that it can happen at certain times. Don't take your eyes off the ball, so to speak.
Yeah.
Mm, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think the variables in play towards the end game in 3 or 4 player gets much more. It's like a multiplication. It's hard to track like, oh, he's got the
Yeah.
upgrade star here at the same time. and you lose track of things like that when you're watching the other players, or and then people come from behind. That's a really good point. Okay, so the complexity of what's at play, you have to track it, and then starting your end game navigation setup like even earlier, because like yeah, where you put that mech down on turn 11 might be the free mech that they take the fight with. So like, and how many times you get to
Mhm.
move with only a double move or triple move, planning that out further in advance for the end game. Okay, that's a great learning.
One thing that I hear all the strong players do when, either if I'm streaming and they're co-streaming with me, or if they have their own streams, is they'll actually count how many turns away somebody is from ending. So they'll
Yeah.
say, okay, so Nordic is 3 turns away. They just need to produce and then, bolster and then move, or move, or you know what I'm saying? Like they'll actually be able to say this is how many turns they can end in. And I think that's also important to know as well, when you're in the game, because then, if they can end quicker than you, then how do you? Is it a matter of limiting their score? What do the score look like? If your score is higher, maybe you need to stall a little bit. Collect your mechs if they need a free combat, or if they need a combat and they really need that. Like if they're on, like the innovative board, let's say, where they really need those extra combats. Then maybe that means that you need to pull your mechs together so they can't, so you can deny that basically.
Yeah, really good point. That's a habit that I have gotten out of.
Yep.
I was using a worksheet as like a cheat sheet for me for 1v1, and Nevik told me after I bombed that last 3 player tournament that like I need to not play it like 1 player and then go back and use that cheat sheet, but do it for 3 player, and that like that allows me to count which stars people need. It's a really good aid that I built, as you're trying until you get the like enough experience, which is a lot. You need a lot. Like before I could put that cheat sheet down for 1v1, I needed hundreds of 1v1 games, and I was playing Joy Division, Nevik. Like I was playing good players. It took me a while.
Mhm.
So some others might advance quicker than I did, but I think that it's a really helpful aid for quite a while. Maybe that might actually help you with the 1v1 a little bit, Yeti, but I need to like I tried to set it up for 3 player and I've got some work to do. But maybe that's something I could share with like in the site strategy, or something channel.
Good.
Did it
Cool.
help you,
Yeah.
Cole, when you were using it as like some guide rails basically of what to pay attention to?
Yep. Absolutely, man.
And then you made it to tier 1 real quick. So tier 1 in 1v1 league. That's an
Hey,
accomplishment
man,
for sure.
I'm out. I'm out though. I didn't come in very last. I'm
You
happy
got
about
second to
that.
last, just like me. It's a
Yep.
No Bad played like all of her games in one day in one set.
She did.
That's not a way to set yourself up to succeed, but she was just trying to like
Yeah.
meet the requirements in time. So okay,
Yep.
cool. Do you go ahead?
She had that label that was like going to be ostracized from the Scythe community. I thought that was really funny, but
Oh,
then
really?
she did it.
That's funny. Yeah. Oh yeah, because that's what we said if you don't complete your matches. So yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
you and I said.
Yeah, you said that in our announcement. So Cole, do you have some more prompts for us here?
Some more prompts.
Yeah, you start with the first question before you dropped. So I was like, all right, you might
Oh
have
yeah.
some of these.
Okay. What do you guys think for like so for 1v1, right? You have a lot of people say Polania is basically the strongest 1v1. They're basically goated in 1v1. And I think that reflects in some of the stats that we saw, like the spreadsheet you sent. What was it? Like Russ Russ NG had like an 11% win rate against Pole Industrial at like 89 or something. Crazy stats. Do you guys think for multiplayer that's different, like different factions? Like for example, Saxony. If you don't watch Saxony and you just let them eco for a while and get to 16 power, those mofo's can come in and just crush the game in a turn, right? Um, Besides Sax, do you think there are any factions in multiplayer that have an advantage?
Yeah, I would say Rust Viet. I mean, this is very
Yeah.
very basic, but basically like they're 1 move from the factory with speed at any time, so they can. And I think most of the clashes that are the most impactful in multiplayer happen around the factory because it's worth so many points. So if you can feign and make people lose power just to take it from you, then you're back in 1 move. Like you can move every turn. So if it's about like point score and spread and controlling like winning making people spend military resources. I think that Rusviet has a big advantage. I would also say, yeah, Polania with the camaraderie, if Pop's in play, that's huge. Um, I'd say those are the two, but I have a very, like, I don't have the most new advanced understanding of it.
In
Hmm.
Crimea as well. Of course, Scout is really, really
I
OP.
yeah.
I was thinking
Any
about
dude,
Scout.
any game where Krim is in with Russ, I mean, it's always Crimea
Yeah.
over Russ Viet. I think we've at least Josh and I have established that amongst ourselves.
Yeah,
Krim
just because Crimea
will
can
beat
can
Russ.
harass Rust on the tundra.
It's
Yeah,
it's
and
way more dramatic in 1v1, but yes.
Mhm.
it's pretty dramatic. I don't know. I had a game with Fomov not too long ago, 4 players, where I was Krim and he was Russ, and Sax was in it too. But I managed to win just by going super aggro against him the whole game.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
So how did you
yeah,
balance Sax? Were they just more passive, like they weren't really
they
taking
couldn't get
active
into
strides
Russ'
in the game?
face. Basically,
You were
yeah,
just
I
you were
lost.
just in there where they can't reach, just
I was just
winning
in there,
fights.
just beat them up. Yeah,
That's kind of
leaving
clever. I've
workers
never
on the
thought
tunnels.
about that actually. That's not an angle I would have ever thought of for three like multiplayer. What do you think, Yeti?
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
No
I
one was
mean,
happy
I think we
except
can
me.
combine concepts too, like you mentioned earlier about protecting a weaker player. Um, you can also protect the weaker player so you can be the one to beat up on them, and then not not let the other person come in and exploit them as well.
That's
I
Might
had
be.
a
cool.
I had a memorable game recently with I was Nordic Industrial. There was Polania and there was Saxony. And Saxony was being slow to get out of the base, and so I did the start where you make up to 3 workers, and then you bring them over to Albion's Mountain. You go to 5, and then I think the turn that I actually went to the factory, I also hit Polania because they were being a little bit slow too. And eventually, because the only way for Saxony to get into Polania's base is through that, the mountain tunnel, and then getting into the forest. Um, I just sat a mech on the forest, and I could kind of beat up on Polania because they wasted so much resources trying to hit me, but I would just go back to the lake and then
Yeah.
hit them again, and they got really pissed off. But there wasn't really, so that was an example where I was able to just kind of attack Polania over and over again, but Saxony really didn't end up exploiting that. Now,
Mm.
granted, I think they were a little bit weaker players because Saxony, I think, was also both Polania and Saxony were slow coming out. I think by the time I hit Polania, then he hadn't even gotten to his encounter yet. So, like, Polania should
Wow.
get to their encounter before turn 6.
Wow. Okay.
Um,
Definitely.
That's interesting.
but yeah, I think that's an interesting anecdote, Cole. Like the fact that you're right because Saxony can't get into Rustfeed space, so you can
Yeah.
hit them there, and then you're also safe from a counterattack or them hitting Rustfeed as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, I
Yeah,
never
it's a
thought
pretty
about that.
specific situation in that 3 player matchup, right? It's kind of hard to extrapolate to other ones, but it's good if you can
Yeah,
do
that
it
was unique based
in
on
that matchup.
Overwatch. I think there's just a much higher diversity of tactics and approaches and creativity that you can use in 3 player, is what I'm guessing. It's a lot more straightforward. Like you can either stall or rush, you can dive, which is like suiciding. In you can so in 1v1, you there are only a couple like tactics and strategies. It's like punish mistakes, um, block them. You can rush or stall based on who needs what stars and what scores. So like grouping to stall when they need a fight and you have all your mechs together and the rep and then your character's unreachable type of thing. And then you can dive, which is like suiciding when you have the point lead. But that's like the diversity of tactics in 1v1 pretty much. Other than like
Mm.
stealing resources and using them that they need and things like that, or like the last piece would be blocking them where they have to take combats when your score is like too high, which is different than like the suiciding. So like putting the mech in the way, so you can protect the area you need when you're weaker, but you have a higher score like high pop. Like I almost got into that situation with Tide this earlier. I was trying to make it there. To create some opportunities for myself, but that's kind of that's like the whole list in 3 player. You've got so much more creativity and different tactics and approaches that you can take, which is really cool and exciting. So I think it does reward more creative thinking, which it seems like Yeti and Cole are much better at than I am. Because you have to really open up like your mind and think like, okay,
I think
yeah,
it's
the
I don't
premise
know.
that
I think it's more just I like to do weird builds sometimes that don't always work. But they're definitely not going to work in 1v1, but they might work in three player.
yeah,
That's the thing, man. One player, the spotlight's always on you, right? It's like
Yeah,
your opponent never forgets about you in 1v1
right.
unless they're really bad. So,
yeah. I
yep,
feel
I think
like
that's where it
Yeti
comes.
with the weird builds, you have some sort of like your playstyle is a little bit like Dur, and you're also really good at
I
three
like his
player like
playstyle.
him. So it's kind of interesting juxtaposition. Like I saw that one game where you had like the most swingable point score ever, and I made that video on it on
Yeah,
like your setup. But I think you had Daykiller to the left of you with Sax Pad or
yep,
something. Um, but
yeah. You ruined me.
but that did like that just seemed I was seeing like signs of like how Dur would play because you weren't like you didn't have any combats you were really giving away to them
Yeah,
even though your score was swingable you still probably could have gotten it back too it was just your worker positioning that made it extra swingable. um
yeah. I remember that game. I made a mistake by leaving my base and going. So I was Crimea. I had two mechs. I was engineering,
Crime Engie.
and I was building and going for a really high pop. But I moved to the forest outside my base, and then Saxony just ran in through the mountain and kicked all my workers, and I didn't really have a way to respond. So, we both kind of lost because I ended up attacking him, which didn't really help me or him.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely. But that was I don't know, just that was a really cool, unique build that you had going there in that tournament game that like no one would have expected out of Crime NG either. So, and you had a really high score, so that was definitely cool. Cole, do you want to take it with another prompt here?
Another prompt. The yeah. No, I got it. Don't worry, I got it. I got it.
Another prompt.
Do you guys ever play anything like above 5 players, like five,
no,
6, 7?
not really. No, it's too
I think
it's
I
too chaotic and too long for me.
Yeah, it's too much. That's one thing. I think the game really starts to break down dynamically when you add in that many players because there's no way that you can possibly stop all the king making and keep track of everybody who's going. Like even 4 player games, I feel like
Might be
sometimes
a lot.
you'll just be like, yeah, you're like Crimea sucks, right? They've been doing terribly this whole game. Forget about him. Forget about him.
Mhm.
Wait a minute. What? What did they? Did they? Oh shit! They just got 4, and then it's over, and Crimea wins or
Yeah.
something. Or yeah, I think 3 is like the perfect amount, but four is decent. What do you guys think about 4?
One thing that it's interesting about four, it's kind of like very different from three, is that um, I just like this game comes to mind that from the last tournament because of course the Ice Bowl was a 4 player tournament, and I
Exactly.
remember
Oh yeah.
I was playing with Fomov, Tamilian, Prince Ali, and me, and what was it? One player went super ham on another player, and so as soon as I saw that I was able to go super ham on the other player because then, these two people are fighting each other. So that was the perfect time for me to hit the last player, and I actually won that game. So it's kind of like, I mean, it's like 3 player in the sense that you can kind of like these two players attacking each other, but then there's a fourth player in the mix. So it's kind of like who you go after is different, maybe. I don't know. I've only
Like
played one
two
4 player
1 player
tournament.
games like mixed
Yeah,
together.
that's what it kind of turned into. And then of course the other two of them were mad at each other because um it was like, why'd you go after me like that? But yeah, everybody's trying to win the game too. So
What you were talking about there reminds me of I'm just like trying to come up with a mental model for myself of how to play multiplayer better. And
Mm.
I don't know, in Halo 2 and Halo 3, if you guys ever played those like for Xbox,
Hell yeah.
um we
okay,
would play like these big LANs at my friend's house. Ryan, actually, you know him, Cole. So like we would have like the soccer team even. We'd have like four or like three or two or three different Xboxes all together and just like play with all the people there. And we would play free for alls. And I was
hmm
really good at that because I would go in and like hit one person in the back while they were fighting and get like the assassination, and then like shoot the other one with my machine gun and get like finish them off and get the
God,
kill.
I hated
Yeah.
guys like you.
I was really good. Like I would get like up to either first or second on the score in terms of the kills. And like the way you talk about this, Yeti, it's like it really sounds like I need to use that mental model for how I play multiplayer. It's like what can I do with as least exposure and highest benefit for myself, and like make sure that if they two people are fighting each other, I go fight the other person because I have a better weapon and I'm confident in like my skills or whatever, and then I get that and finish that and then turn on the other two kind of thing. Like I really need to
Mhm.
change that's the mental model that I need for to be successful in multiplayer in terms of
Mm.
my strategic decision making. So that's like a breakthrough for me right there, hopefully, assuming that that actually works. But
Well,
that's
there was a
gonna be
memorable game
it's gonna be
that
good.
you played in this last tournament. It was you, Fomoff, and somebody else. And
Flying
I
Mustang.
talked. Well, oh, it was okay. It was Flying Mustang. So you were Polania, and you just rushed Mex, and then hit Fomoff on Crimea at his own base and crippled him. And then after that, I don't think you messed with Fomoff for a while. It's like the damage had been done, so you just went about your own game plan, and so you won at that point. And I guess that's one thing that I want to talk about too is like when I'm like you don't want to just be passive either. Like you don't just sit back and say I'm just going to wait for my opponents to hit each other. You know, if people make mistakes or if there's something you can exploit like a free combat, you know, especially if you're not going to have to throw all of your resources into exploiting that, then it's I think it's definitely worth taking that 1v1 almost like even in like in the you know like the first person shooters, you know, like you can take isolated 1v1s against multiple different people. And I think what you were talking about earlier is kind of like you're trying to take a 1v2, like you're trying to hold two people back at once. But if you, I'm not, I mean, obviously, I don't know what this would look like in the board state that you had, but if you made it two isolated 1v1s, maybe that would be a different outcome.
Yeah, definitely. And I did that in like the next game. Or like a game later and lost, where it was just like I totally
Okay.
controlled because I have like a control play style, so I totally controlled both the
Mm.
people and stayed stuck myself in the mid game the whole game and never advanced. So, um, yeah, no, that's a good point. So it's like basically finding the timing for the like it's like really controlled aggression based on like the optimal time, waiting for the optimal windows, and then you just stop and go back to being selfish completely with your playstyle. That's kind of what I should be looking for. So yeah, just like wait until they're both kind of low health and stuck in a corner fighting in Halo or whatever, and throw like one grenade where they're in like a little alcove, which will capture it, and then just like
Nice.
back to whatever, getting myself a better gun. Let's just say I'm just gonna use this analogy. I feel like this is what I need to succeed for like Factory Rush.
Dude, what you need to do is download Halo 2. There's a Halo 2 you can still play online. There's a very active
I
community,
know,
guys. I
yeah,
invite you in.
that would be so fun. I love
Oh,
Halo
awesome.
2.
Send
So
you
we
the
got
link. I
it's
mean
a
it.
Halo
I play
podcast.
often.
Do you? Oh, nice. Okay, that's so fun.
Yeah.
I know there's a computer one. Yeah, that's cool.
Do you guys notice that like in multiplayer games, people get way more like angry and competitive in Scythe? Like the keyboard warriors come out.
Yeah,
I think so
it's all the
because
king
you know if
making.
somebody makes a mistake, like leaves a free mech out, and somebody exploits it, then everybody who didn't get the chance to
Everybody,
exploit it is going to be pissed off because it's like the
everyone.
only reason they didn't get it is because of turn order or something like
Yeah,
that.
turn order.
You stupid king making. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
a lot of anger in multi. That's one of my favorite elements of it. Actually, I know, like watching drama.
Nice.
You like to watch the drama, yeah. Joy Division
I do.
comes out hard with the salt because he just can see every little thing. He's just like, oh, why didn't you block there? Are you kidding me? Like, why didn't you this there?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's
Joy
good.
gets angry about it. Foam off is like disappointed in you, like a dad will be like, "What? Why'd you do that, man?" You're like, "I'm sorry."
He's kind of nice when
Bad
he's
man.
disappointed in you. Yeah. Joy gets angry. I
He's
feel better
also
when they're just angry at me. Yeah.
I think Fomoff is also like whenever I see him, he's just like let's just go next, like next game.
How
Like
does
he doesn't want to
Nevik do
linger in
it? What
the
do you guys
bad
think?
feelings about it. Oh, I don't know.
Nevik,
Um,
I think Nevik is like a resigned humorist about it. Like he'll like come off like he's angry about it, but then he'll throw like an LOL at the end, like he's not actually angry, you know.
Okay, yeah.
Like, yeah, he might be pissed for a second, like okay, it's fine, right?
I mean,
That's what I get.
I prefer they all do that than not point it out to me because like that's an opportunity for me to improve that I didn't see. So like I want that marked, even if someone's mad at me. I'm glad that it's marked so that way I know. That could just be me though.
No, I agree. I would rather have the mistake pointed out. I'm just thinking. I mean, I definitely accidentally king made a couple times in round 3 because I was playing against Nevik in Joy Division and it was late for me, so I miscalculated twice and threw the game, and yeah, they were both pretty pissed. So I think that they can both get pissed for sure.
That's fair, totally. Okay, nice.
It's been a good look.
So maybe we do one more question if we have a good one, and then wrap it up. I'm just wondering, Yeti, do you have any prompts particularly?
Yeah, actually, one of the things that I wanted to talk about too was how do you treat the game differently if there's strong skill disparity. Like if you're playing like you're going to play the game differently if it's you versus two top players versus you're just playing random ranked. There's two players you don't know. They're not involved in the tournament or any tournament play or anything like that. Like how would you approach that differently?
That's a great one.
Mm. I would say, for me personally, in kind of a random game, a 3-player game, I'm gonna assume that one of them's gonna make a stupid mistake pretty quickly, and that I'm gonna do what I can to exploit it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna try to set myself up in a position to exploit whatever player I think is playing worse and be a little bit more aggressive. Whereas against two good players in a multiplayer game, I'll probably hang back and like see what the dynamic is first. Whereas I'll be a lot more agile with worse players.
Yeah. Let's see. Versus two good players. Like I played with you and Yeti. I played with you and Nevik a couple games, I think, and then you and Release a couple games, and kind of I let you guys because you guys had just are better. So there was like a little more ego between the two of you than me. So I was able to kind of sit back and let you guys fight. I didn't do anything clever. I just kind of ecoed and tried to play selfish. And I ended up doing much better in those games. Uh, with Joy and Nevik, I think there might be still, I'm not sure how it goes. But yeah, I try to sit back and eco and play defensively and get set up like some board positioning so I could swoop in at a time kind of thing. If I'm playing versus weaker players, this is not the correct move, but I try to like police and 1v1 them both at the same time. So that's not correct.
Mm.
I should probably just play. Maybe what I should do is just try to like lock down the factory and eco and just completely control the factory. Maybe that would be the right move. Like try to get there. Yeah, even if I'm not first, just lock it down. What would you say is
Hmm.
a good answer for like what one should do, Yeti?
So There's another game that I played recently that I actually lost. I was Crimea, and there was a Resviet, and then it was either Polania or Nordic. I think it was Nordic, and the Nordic player was just kind of wandering around, not really doing a whole lot. Like you could tell, they didn't really have a strong game plan for which bottom row actions they wanted to complete. And Resviet was doing Resviet things. I think it was Resviet Patriotic, so they were just kind of sitting back, working on their bottom row actions. And so I was also trying to sit back and eco and take my time and control the middle. So I even I could have taken the factor at one point, and instead I completed a bottom row action. And what ended up happening is Rusty had finally hit the factory in a way where I couldn't actually hit him by that point because it had so much power. He exploited the combat on the Nordic player and then won. And I was just kind of thinking after the fact, like, okay, I should have done something to cripple Rustviet a bit earlier and then exploited that combat a lot earlier. So I think you need to play not aggressively, but you need to play actively. Like you can't fall asleep and just assume that your opponents are not going to know what to do because they might be they might be really weak against you getting in their face early and showing aggression. And if you just put pressure on them, like if you stick a mech in range, maybe they'll do something suboptimal. Um, but I feel like when I sit back and I'm just like really passive and try to focus on my own score, then sometimes they can just sort of come out and win, and because
Okay.
they're playing without pressure at that point. I think
Okay.
that's kind of true in chess as well. Like if you're just trying to playing solidly and not taking advantage of openings and opportunities, then they might actually beat you, even if you're a better player. Because then you might make one mistake at a crucial moment, and they actually end up capitalizing on that. So I like Cole's answer. I think you do try to capitalize on mistakes because there's going to be holes in their setup, and if there aren't, then they're just better players. Um, and so then also when you're playing against strong players, I feel like you want to create a hard target. Like you don't want to sacrifice your own eco and macro and everything to, set up a hard target, but you don't want to leave yourself open either and do a greedy play that is easily exploitable. So sometimes you can get away with greed. Sometimes you can't. It also depends on like threat levels and stuff too. Like if one person is extremely threatening and the other person looks like they're about to police them, then you can get away with more greed. Um,
Definitely.
yeah.
You can get ganged up on if you get too greedy too. For sure. I've had it happen where like, oh, I've got 9 food on this tile. This is dope.
Oh,
Someone hits
sure.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I beat them in a fight, and then the next guy is like, all right, I'm taking that food. I'm hungry, and it happens. So you gotta
I
watch
think yeah,
yourself.
resources especially that gets people hungry. They're looking to take those away from you,
Yeah, people are
which is
Yep.
funny
way
because
more interested
like
in resources in multiplayer, I've noticed, than single player. If like resources that
yeah.
aren't used for anything specifically, they just add to your score count. Like
Hanging out on the board, yeah.
I don't get it. I'm like, what? They just want the extra two. I guess the edges are thinner. They want like the extra 2 points or whatever off the 4 resources. Like it only makes sense when you're ending right when you take them. But yeah, because like otherwise those points don't matter for. But yeah, I do have a question though for you guys. When all right, so this is about popularity in multiplayer.
Mm-hmm.
When do you deliberately go for higher tier popularity? Like, at what point in the game do you know that? And in which situations should you go for it? Because there is this scenario where, like, you just take encounters, it keeps giving you pop as the best option. Like, not that scenario, because, like, sometimes you'll naturally end up with it because it's like, it puts you down a path and you're like, well, I might as well get 2 more now since it'll boost my score this much. But it's so fragile in terms of point swings because like people can deny they can just put a lot of workers with their mechs etc and stop you unless you got camaraderie. So
Right.
um, what are the scenarios where you decide to go for high tier popularity in multiplayer?
I think it kind of gets built into your opening. Like there's some
Mhm.
openings where maybe you end up at 5 popularity because you're not going to 8 workers and producing a bunch of times. And so then if you find some extra pop at an encounter, you can afford to adjust things a bit to where you just end up at tier 2. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that's something that separates like really good players as well as knowing when to go for the high popularity. A data point that I actually wanted to share because I did a spreadsheet with all the different encounters is there's actually only 19% of the encounters will give you popularity over like 2 or 3 basically. Um, or they'll give you like 2 or 3 popularity, only 19%. So if you start running into a lot of those, then that might be a good sign to take the pop. But I think it depends on the matchup too. Like maybe sometimes you're in a situation where you need the extra tempo, and that's more important than the popularity.
For
What would you say,
sure.
Cole?
Yeah, and I would say it's a little faction dependent too. Like I would say
Sure.
mostly, like you're not going to do it much on Sax. Pole's always a good option for popularity. Crimea, I would say in multiplayer is a lot more useful with popularity than you might think, because they have often an opportunity to spread early and to just get the spread out of the way. And usually by the time you need your combats, you only have to lose 1 or 2, something like that, if you're playing multiplayer. I think it's easier to find battles without losing popularity in single mechs in multiplayer as well. So, yeah, I would say it's kind of faction dependent, right? I would do it with Nord sometimes, Crimea sometimes, and Polania. Russ and Sax, not so much. And IFA,
I
I don't mess with that.
I'll do it with IFA if the bid is good and if I just need to stall. Like if I don't have a lot of agency and I can get to decent popularity. But at the same time, as I say that, I feel like it can be a trap where you can kind of feel safe and secure, but then they kick again because you don't have agency to end the game. Then there's always this pressure for them to kick just enough workers to where all of a sudden they're winning, even though they're in tier one.
Mhm.
I'll give one thing with I actually like going Sax agricultural and going high pop sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm a greedy
Nah.
bastard.
Let me ask you, Yeti, in your tournament run, did you
Mhm.
win any games where you were on the IFA like zero
Yeah.
bid combo, and how do
Oh,
you
zero
approach
bid.
that?
Dude,
Dude,
he
that
kicked our
run,
ass with Togawa zero bid that one game, remember?
Oh yeah,
that was
yeah, I did. That's
beautiful.
right. That was
And
Tagawa
did you have high
agricultural.
pop? Like, was pop part of the equation?
I don't think so. I think it was mostly coins. And just kind of so in that game in particular, you guys were fighting each other on Nordic and Polania, and I just kind of slowly made my way to the factory and then stuck the factory and just
Yeah.
kind of finished out the bottom row actions. And by that time, you guys had depleted each other's power and combat cards so much that I could hold the factory as Tagawa. Um, I actually don't think Popular really made it into any of those games. I don't
No,
think
I
I'm
think
very
you were
good at stalling with high pop, actually.
I
Did you
think you were
win?
in T1. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you win any with the zero bid IFA in the tournament, Yeti? Because I definitely didn't.
Um, Let me see. Well, I must have because I won all my games in round one.
Okay,
Um,
that would make sense. And so, how do you do
Damn.
that? How does one play? How does one play that position in the swapping of the auto bidder?
yeah, it was Albion Industrial. So in that case, I remember that game. Okay, so round one was Albion Industrial, Tagawa Patriotic, and Polania Mechanical. So that was the game that was the one I referenced where I was Polania and I policed both. I briefly policed both Albion and Tagawa to kind of set them back, and then just kind of did my own thing. Um, But with Albion, I remember I actually went a super greedy opening, and I remember I wasn't punished by Polania. So it's kind of luck, a little bit. I was greedy and I got away with it. Um, but I mean, yeah, just you just need to get your bottom row actions. I mean, it's the same kind of game plan. You need to know what stars you're going for. You need to work towards your stars because I don't feel like you're ever going to win a game if you have 0 stars. There's just too many points.
Yeah.
And you need to try to control the center of the board. Have that agency. That's kind of some stuff that blends into chess stuff as well. But you can't just be cramped in your own home base and win either.
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
so like if you're Albion, maybe that means you get as far out as the mountain tunnel, and you have flags on the tundra, the mountain, and the village, and you hold all those points. And you have handful of stars, handful of coins, and everybody else is fighting each other and they can't get in range of you because otherwise you'll get a combat. So then you can just kind of slowly spread out. So you can get in situations like that. Um,
The flags were on you said the oil tile in your base, the village tile in your base, and the mountain tunnel.
Mountain Tunnel. Yeah.
Okay. But you're not
Yeah.
doing like. Do you think Albion's good with the worker whip at a factory rush? Like they're really fast, and especially on industrial. So like, as long as you can get an upgrade in there for the worker whip. But like, is that a smart approach, or is that not going to win in 3 player? Because like I feel like with the zero bid in 3 player and low agency, you have to buy yourself more time by having the high stall score with like tier 2 pop most games. And if you're gonna sacrifice development for a factory rush, that's not going to set you up for like the mid game correctly.
Yeah. I think it depends on the other factions. I think I'm. It's very hard for me to justify factory rushing if there's Saxony or Polania in the game. If it's me and Rusviet and Crimea, I mean even Rusviet because they can rush out the township mech and get to the factory first.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if it's like Crimea and Tagawa and Albion, then I would consider doing a factory rush strategy as Albion. But you just don't want to get caught out in the middle of the board, or even just get blocked because then you can't worker whip if you're blocked. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, it's so easy
yeah,
to stop
that's
that
my
worker
thoughts.
whip if you have any early game movements. You just put a worker down. Like, is the easiest. It's so little investment to really hurt them. So, like, and they have to invest so much into it. So, like, yeah, I guess you need to make sure that no one will have the timing to like disrupt that, which is
Yeah.
unlikely in most games that no one can. But yeah, okay. So looking at the factions, but like, okay. Do you see? So is popularity a big part of it? Is that like a critical tool when you're in that zero bid position in tournament play or no? It's more
Well,
about
I'm
board
gonna add
positioning.
actually. I just looked back through everything, and the only times I went as the zero bid was that first round on Albion Industrial, and then in the finals on Polania Agricultural. But in the finals, we all won on Polania. It was a Polania
Yeah.
sweep.
Okay.
So I think I'm not actually as good on the zero bid. What I would do is bid is because we were drafting. I would draft a really weak faction and then try to exploit it. So I tended to win on other people's picks, not so
Okay.
much my own. I try to find something that they'd be uncomfortable with, and then draft that, and then try to beat it.
Who would you say was a good player on the zero bid in that tournament?
Oh,
Probably Wales and Nevik, I'm guessing. Well, that
Nevik probably was. Yeah, he's really good at IFA.
he is really good at IFA. That alone could have powered his. I think it was a big part of his success in T1 these last 2 seasons with like the home combos he's bringing and IFA. Like, if you could just orient around IFA, he's so good at it. Um, there's just so many little things I'll forget where I'll lose critical edges. Like, oh, I forgot he can single move jump back to his trap on the factory. Like, I lost a game or two
Yeah.
season before that off that, so I'm just like, if you played it right, you could probably take second or third place solely off of your IFA skills in the 1v1 where you get to propose the home and away. But yeah, I saw Wills play some like Russ Ag in these tournaments with the zero bid, and like he was just really good at making it competitive with like different ways of doing it. Um, but I haven't seen him play zero bids on IFA super competitively. But Nevik is that's probably one of his specialties. I think there would be, but he didn't play. So yeah.
So actually have a quiz question for you guys. One person so far that I've seen won on the zero bid in rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the Spring Auto Bidder tournament. Can you guys guess who it is?
1, 2, 3, and 4. How many rounds were there?
So there were 4 rounds, and then it went into the semifinals.
It's a great question. Can you list the participants?
I was
Cole doesn't know the
Dude, I
participants, I
was
think.
so
Oh, okay.
disconnected from this whole tournament. Like,
So it was me, Nevik, Release the Kraken, Joy Division, Tomilian, Campo, Day, BB Scythe, Fomoff, Gricius, Britta, Nobody Knows, Poser, Scurry, Viamere, Hugu,
It was a strong field.
Winter's Coming, and
Man.
Flying Mustang. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody in here is,
It was a really
you know,
strong
I've
field.
seen
Like,
it
there was like only two.
multiple tournaments.
I think I got last in the whole
random
tournament.
Gricius. Was it Gricius?
It's actually a good guess.
Which is
My
That's
guess
a
is
random
No.
guess.
no, he didn't win on his round 1. He didn't win on the zero bid.
My guess is release, and then my next guess was gonna be my choice after that was gonna be shit. I forgot
Oh,
who it
she
was.
also
It was from
lost
the
round
list you gave. Yeah.
I
It's
guess
actually BB
Gage is.
Scythe. It's BB
Oh,
Scythe.
BB.
Okay, he was
Yes,
gonna
no.
be my like my
He's
last guess.
really
Like
great.
I would never guess that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
It's not
he
surprising.
killed it on the zero bids. I actually took his opening for because I actually streamed his game, and he played Albion Industrial because Nevik also drafted Albion Industrial, and then later that week I played his opening on Albion Industrial and won. So thank you, BB Scythe.
Nice. BB Site's got some skills for sure. People think he likes high tier combos the most, but he's still really good at IFA. So
Yeah.
cool. All right. Well, I think let's wrap it up, and then next time I think we're gonna either talk through some more of these 1v1 league results that we've unearthed in terms of win rates, and or
Mhm.
another parallel learning between Scythe and chess because Cole and Yeti both play chess and probably have a lot to. And Yeti, we'd like to get Yeti's perspective on the chess side too. He's got a lot to share as well. So.
Good.
Cool.
We're going to talk about the Kendrick Lamar Drake beef.
Yes.
That's also good. Next episode
And
coming
that
up. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you, James, Yeti, and Cole. Bulldog. Coma.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys. See you next time.
All right.
Bye.